Hello and welcome to the True Man podcast, the podcast designed to create a generation of self defined men. Today, I'm joined by Conor Warren, the founder of Spark UK. Conor, it's an absolute pleasure. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thanks. Thank you so much for having me.
Good, good. I'm looking forward to this one. Should be exciting. I'm sure you'll let people
Definitely.
know a little bit more, but it's a different angle, something that we've not covered in a while. So yeah, definitely looking forward to it. But as always, Connor, in your own words, what makes you a man?
Absolutely. And this is a really interesting question, something I've been pondering a lot in the past few hours of what actually makes me a man. And obviously there's the scientific aspect of the chromosomes in which that make me a man. But I think it's a very subjective question. And I guess for me, the things that make me a man is sort of my vulnerability and that sort of transition period between being a boy to being a man. And actually the maturity levels in which I have gained over the years of experience from becoming a boy to a man. And yeah, just the fact that, yeah, I kind of try to sort of support those around me. I try to look after my family and try to look after my friends. And yeah, just try and really do that, which I think to me is sort of what makes me a man.
Do you think it was an age thing, as in the day that you sort of turned 18, or was there a little bit more to it than just boy to man in that sense?
Yeah, I think for me, it wasn't an age thing. I don't think on my 18th birthday I magically became more mature. I think for me, it was very much a journey of understanding myself better. And that transition period from boy to man, I think, was really, a period between sort of 18 and 20 where I was, really learning more about who I am as a person, who I am, sort of both internally and externally. And yeah, just really developing that understanding. I think that's what led me from that sort of maturity aspect of becoming more mature and sort of leading that transition and finishing that transition from boy to man, which I don't think I'm fully there yet. I don't think all of us are fully ever at the end of that transition.
Yeah, I don't think so either. We'll definitely get into that a little bit further on. But why don't you explain what Spark UK is and how it came about?
Yes, so yeah, we are a mental health organisation run by young people. And me and a group of friends, when we were 14, we were ranting about mental health. We were ranting about how the system wasn't there for young people and how the education was very outdated. And we spent several hours discussing what we wanted in an ideal world around mental health support. And then we said, why don't we just try doing this ourselves? So we expected absolutely nothing of it, and we started developing resources and videos for schools across the country. And yeah, here we are 6 years later, and we're in over 350 schools across the country. We've worked with some of the top celebrities in the world. We've worked with some amazing charities. And yeah, we just continue to show young people how to truly support themselves with mental health and mental well-being, and try and just support schools and educators in understanding what it's like to be a young person in the modern climate, because it is so different to be a young person now than it was even a few years ago.
Yeah, it's definitely changing quickly. I think one of the most interesting things I find about that is obviously at the time you were a teenage boy, and
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, I imagine the conversation was with other teenage boys. And there seems to be at the moment this sort of narrative around the fact that boys don't talk, they don't have an idea of what to talk. I think there was some study that came out recently that said that the average boy can name three emotions, which I find beyond bizarre. So
Yeah.
when you decided that you were going to do that, were you expecting pushback, or like what was the sort of, was it just pure youthful naivety?
Absolutely. I think it was a real mixture of youthful naivety and definitely a lot of pushback. I think I was in a very unique position where I did understand what mental health was, and that is something that most teenage boys don't necessarily understand, especially in the circumstances and the circles I was in. We found that actually there was a lot of misinformation on what mental health truly was. And I think there definitely was a lot of pushback, and there definitely was a lot of conversations for me, I was very fortunate where I grew up in a household in which my mum worked in safeguarding, so I understood from a very young age what mental health actually was, and I heard stories from her work and stuff of people that were struggling, and yeah, I just really understood um, from a young age what that was. And I think that is, as I said, something very unique that most young men don't get. So going into that secondary school environment, age 14, I was year 9 at the time, and being a year 9 boy, it wasn't a conversation that was had. And equally, I was when I was initially building Spark, it was something that almost there were two separate sides. So I never actually acknowledged or spoke about my own mental health. I pushed my mental health aside and said, oh no, I don't actually fit under this category. I'm building this thing. However, I never saw the link until much later in life that actually I was struggling at the time of my own mental health. And I think because of the circles and the environments I was in, it wasn't necessarily comfortable for me to acknowledge that in my own circle of friends. And I think that's something that so many young men still to this day do struggle with, and something that, yeah, was kind of very prominent at the time.
Where do you think that disconnect comes from around sort of mental health and misunderstanding it, I guess, and also what were some of those misunderstandings?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're still in a society that is influenced by older generations. And a lot of this mental health misunderstandings do come from those older generations. I grew up in North Devon, which is quite a rural area, so it means that generations are typically a lot older, and typically they're farmer generations, or they are kind of people that are of an older age. And the conversations around mental health there are very outdated in terms of it's just grow up, get on with it, stop crying, mental health isn't real, just go and do this. And I think that was a mindset that was passed down from parents. So it meant that, yeah, young people, both male and female, they couldn't fully acknowledge what they were feeling because their parents wouldn't let them acknowledge it, or they wouldn't let them understand it. And I think those misunderstandings a lot were around things like I don't have mental health. That is something that when I first started Spark, I was told a lot, oh, I don't have mental health. Or one also that I was told a lot was, you don't have mental health. So why should you become the face of mental health if you don't have it? And that was something that really struck me and really stuck with me. And even to this day, there is still so many young people that, well, so many people in general that think I don't have mental health, so why should I worry about it? But in reality, mental health is the exact same as the physical health, and it's just about how we look after that. And I think that is still such a big stigma, which so many people don't understand, and that's a stigma that is still prominent in secondary schools, and that really creates these environments in which young people don't feel comfortable to truly open up about their emotions. And as you said, a lot of young men can only name 3 emotions, and that's because that's what they are expected to show. They're not expected to show anything other than, sometimes it's anger, happiness, and then something in between. There is no sliding scale, but in life there is a sliding scale.
If you were to describe mental health to a year 9 boy, how would you describe it?
Yeah, I think I would, similar to what I said a minute ago, is mental health is how you think, feel, and act. It's as simple as that. It is every thought, it's every emotion, it's everything that you think and feel. And as I said, it's very similar to physical health. So your physical health, if you exercise it, can be really good. But equally, some days it could be really bad. And mental health is the exact same. If you don't exercise it, then it's only going to get worse. So yeah, a lot of the time when I'm speaking to young people, especially year 9 boys, where there is that kind of that prejudice around it, it is that as simple as that. It's you look after your physical health and you don't deny that physical health is real. So why are you denying that mental health is real?
Yeah, it's a fine balance. So obviously, I go into schools as well, and I think this will sort of touch on one of the skill sets that your organization has. So I'm obviously in my 30s, and that's already 20 years away from these boys. And I remember being a 14-year-old boy, and I remember some of the sort of situations that I found myself in and some of the things that I was sort of struggling with or going through. And there may be some similarities, but there are some scarce differences. There's some real big differences in what boys are thinking now to what I was thinking of at the time. Sort of playing on that. What are some of the things that you've done at Spark UK that sort of separates you from other mental health organisations or just school pastoral care in general?
Yeah, I think for us the biggest thing is we are youth led. So, I'm 20, I'm at uni. When, as I said, I was 14 when I set this up. So I was going through what the young people were going through themselves. And for us, that is where we are so unique. We're one of the only, if not the only, completely youth led charity in the country, in which truly has young people at the centre of the conversation and at the centre of everything. And I think that's something that's really important because, as you said, the world is changing so much at the moment, and adults, even in your 30s, you can't necessarily relate as much to those young people because the world is changing so much. So for us, we are in a very fortunate position where we can relate at a slightly better level to those young people because we are our own target audiences. And, we've been able to do some great stuff. And a lot of the time we find young people prefer to listen to people their own age than they do some teacher or some adult. So that puts us in a position where we can do lots of video content in which is fronted by young people, so that actually they do feel that they are fully engaged with that. And we equally did some great webinars at the end of last year, touching on topics such as masculinity and what it truly means to be a man. And we are in a very fortunate position where we've got some great connections with some inspirational people who we can bring into these schools and really bring those conversations together with that youth voice. And I can sit there as a 20-year-old and I can say, well, if I'm not, if I don't find them interesting, no young person's going to find them interesting. So it's a really unique position to be in.
Yeah, I do find it fascinating, especially like sometimes week to week. Like I try my best, and I think the fact that I'm open and the fact that I know that, I think that gives me a slightly more credibility. I'm not trying to pigeonhole something into them. I am trying, but yeah, it is tough to keep up for sure. One of the things that I would really sort of like to maybe touch on a little bit more is that sort of youth voice around masculinity and sort of where boys are sort of sitting with it. We've heard a lot of things in the press. We've seen a lot of stuff come out in recent years and in recent months, and there's a lot of stuff in the pipeline as well. But what do you think is the difference between what boys are actually thinking and sort of what's being portrayed in the media?
Yeah, I think there is a massive difference in terms of a lot of the things we are seeing in the media is very sensationalized. So it is portrayed in which this is a wider proportion of young men that are actually thinking this than in reality that's not the case. And I think, we are seeing a lot of dangers in which there are certain influencers or certain things that are definitely swaying young people. However, I think there's a few radical individuals in which is in that age group that is then being portrayed within the media and is being portrayed, and in reality that isn't the full truth. You equally have so many young men who are doing incredible things and who don't agree with what the media is portraying and don't agree with what is actually going on. And I think, there is that sort of divide in which often young men can be victimized within the media, and it can seem like, just a really, looking at last year and some of the stuff that came out, and it could be a really difficult time to be a young man because the media just completely victimized them and completely said every young man feels like this, and he actually is only thinking about this, this, and this. And in reality, that wasn't the case. And as I said, that was only a select few. So I think it is really important to have young men, allow them to have a seat at the table and allow them to actually say what they are thinking. And, there are so many things in which have happened in other generations and are happening in other generations that we don't talk about as much. that actually probably are more dangerous than the conversations we're hearing about young men. And I think there is that kind of thing that a lot of people, when they don't understand something, they are very quick to blame. I think that's a very human response. If you don't understand something, you just blame somebody else. And I think this is the issue that we've been having over the past couple of years often, is that adults, people in authority, don't understand what the young men are seeing. So rather than trying to listen to them and actually understand what it is, we are seeing them just blame young people, blame young men, and say that they're the problem, they need to deal with it, kind of thing. And I think that can be a very dangerous response.
I completely agree. I think it's only fueling the other side of the coin that you're looking at, which is obviously mental health and boys' mental health,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it's just fueling that. Like if you're 14, 15, 16, and you all you've done is got a slightly deeper voice and changed slightly and maybe had a bit of a growth spurt, all of a sudden you're a misogynist that hates women and has got no emotion. Whereas a few years ago you were probably cuddled and being called cute and wearing like denim shorts. So yeah, there is a there is a huge sort of weird space in which boys become teenagers and they don't. And I feel like, what if you've got some thoughts on this? There seems to be a speed up. So rather than then being treated like what that is, which is adolescence or a teenager, they're treated like men, but with the bandwidth of boys still. Like, how are you seeing that affect one, mental health, and two, what's your sort of opinion on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we are seeing the age of becoming an adult in society lowering and lowering. I think, the legal age is 18, but I think society, yeah, socially we are seeing that age drop. Young men are and young boys are kind of that sort of 13 to 18 is a very weird age gap where, because of things like social media, with even things like finances, and with having to go and get a job, and young people not deciding to leave education and go do other stuff, we are seeing these young boys almost having to become young men at different ages. And I think that can be a really damaging thing because, I'm sure most people listening to this will remember their teenage years of, the random stuff and the going and doing stupid things with your friends and all that kind of stuff, which form your life and form your career and form everything that happens. And we've almost got this generation of young people that aren't allowed to experience that and are not experiencing that. And obviously there are some things that shouldn't be done because they're stupid things and they do disrupt the community. But equally, now you can't there's a lot of stuff that, boys, girls, whatever, they just want to have fun. They just want to go and do stuff, but they can't because it gets shoved on the local Facebook gossip page that then they can't do stuff. And I think there is this kind of thing where actually, yeah, young people, young men are expected to grow up so much faster, are expected to get jobs so much faster. They're expected to come across a certain way on social media. They're not allowed to like certain things because that would make them still a boy instead of a man. They need to think about like this mindset and this mindset. And I think that, as I said, that can be really dangerous because that does build a generation that just don't have that life experience and those fun memories to actually help them in life.
Yeah, I think if Facebook groups existed when I was a kid, I would be a
Yes.
or ring doorbells at least. Like you can't even knock on a door harmlessly anymore and run away without being caught. So yeah, it is a shame. I think there is this sort of acceleration of growth and age. Like I think when I was like 14, I was still playing with Warhammer and playing football and trying to decide what I liked really more than anything. Whereas I'm having conversations with boys and they're saying how they need to provide for their partner, themselves, and then their immediate family outside of that. This sort of goal to retire their mother or their parents seems to keep cropping up, which I just find beyond bizarre as like where that sort of what stemmed from. Or, well, I understand where it stemmed from, but the fact that it has deep rooted itself within boys, where Where do we sort of draw the line on online content? Because there is this benefit to being online. Like, there's no question around that. As someone who's probably benefited from the online space, it's
Yeah.
you can see its benefits. But how do we sort of educate boys, and how do we sort of teach around what is online and how to best utilize what is there?
Yeah, definitely. I think, I'd be very biased if I said that I wanted to get rid of social media, because in reality, I don't have a career without social media. And I think so many people, that is the case now. And very much, we're in these conversations right now about the bans and stuff like that, and there's so much going on. And I think there are so many positives for young people, especially young men, to have access to social media, to learn, to hear other opportunities, to hear other views, which I think is really important. However, I think it is important to draw that line and understand that what you are seeing on social media is portrayed in a certain way. It is a media product. It is a certain storyline in which you are there to follow. You're there as a consumer of that, and I think that's often a thing that a lot of people can forget. That actually this is entertainment at the end of the day. Social media is there predominantly for entertainment. Even if there is educational elements, it is still there to entertain you. And I think there is this real discussion right now of how we can truly educate young people to use social media productively. And yeah, I think that's around having these conversations about what truly understanding what you're seeing online. And actually, there are some great examples of, like, to a large extent, you can decide what you see on your social media. Like, it's not going to be perfect, but if you follow a bunch of Love Island influencers, you're predominantly going to get that style of content. Whereas if you follow a bunch of funny cat meme pages, you're more than likely going to get more cat memes. And that, that's a prime example of the accounts you follow. They're going to more or less dictate what you're seeing on the algorithm. And a lot of the time, that's what I try and teach young men and young people just in general, is actually what you follow will dictate what you see. So if you don't want to see all these Love Island pictures and all these influencers that look like that, if you unfollow them or mute those accounts, you're less likely to see content like that. And I think that's a really productive thing to do, is just every 6 months, just have a bit of a refresh of your social media, and actually, who are you following? Is that productive for you? And if it's not, then maybe it's time to mute the account or unfollow them, because sometimes I remember being in school, and if you unfollowed a friend, then that would be like the world is ending, and the whole year group would hear that you unfollowed that person. You must absolutely hate them. And sometimes it might just be because they're posting annoying stuff on social media. So there is this beautiful button that mutes them, which means you can't see their content, but you still follow them. I think that's a very important thing for young men to understand, is you can mute people. Yeah, I think it's about, rather than having the conversation around getting rid of social media, it's the conversation around how do we actually equip young people to use it properly.
I think it's the mute the mute button is the way to go for sure. If you don't want to cause any arguments,
Yes.
but the one thing that I really want to touch on is, I guess, the elephant in the room that is sort of been coined the manosphere, and this
Yes.
sort of consumption of online. I get
Yeah.
propaganda is probably the best way of describing it, but yeah, online content that sort of breaches the line of acceptability in society. Like, from your own opinion, do you feel that boys, and in some cases, I guess girls as well, because it sort of is two sides of the same coin, are they actually consuming this content? Is this something that boys are genuinely interested in?
Yes, I do think there is interest in this content, and I think the reason it is done so well, and certain influencers have done so well, is because of the fundamental human psychology they put into it. A lot of these videos around the manosphere are promoting quite normal mindsets in which young men want to follow. We're looking now at the hustler mindset, and the kind of, you know, AI automations and all of this kind of calendar scheduling stuff and like all of these different like side hustles which to get rich quickly. And we are seeing constantly social media being used to promote these these sort of mindsets and these strategies. However, I think the dangerous aspect is when people idolize those characters and idolize those influencers because we are all humans. We will not always agree with 100% of what somebody does or says, and certain influencers were doing things which were immoral, illegal in some cases, and unfortunately there was a certain group of individuals who did not fully understand that they don't have to agree with everything they see, and because they agreed with 95% of what certain influencers said, they thought, well, I must agree with 100% of that. I think that's a very, very dangerous aspect we were in. And, as a young man myself, I saw a lot of the content. I had a lot of friends that were involved in that kind of those circles of the manosphere and sort of all these different conversations. And, it would be debates that I would have with them, and a lot of it is rooted on psychology and on healthy habits. However, not all of that was productive and not all of that was good. And that's where this kind of this divide came into place, and where this then got so much attention was because of those few, that like maybe 10% of immoral things that those influencers were promoting, which then completely overtook everything else, and that's what caused the issues. And I think for young people in general, there's always going to be influencers in which you will sort of, I guess, idolize in certain ways and look up to. And it's just about teaching young people that actually you don't have to agree with 100% of what they say. You never will. Me and you will not agree on 100% of things. You won't agree with your parents on 100% of things. That's normal. That's okay. But I think we were in a time in which we had certain groups of people that agreed 100%, and they were taking radical action on that because they were being radicalized in a certain way to have these certain opinions and these certain viewpoints, and then to act upon those, in which they were encouraged to do, which isn't a productive way of doing that. And I think you can have your own views, but you don't necessarily always have to publicly advocate for that.
We definitely live in echo chambers now, like as you say, from algorithms. If you follow
Absolutely.
if you follow self-help content, you will soon find yourself on the red pill side of the internet. If you're a lonely boy and you've not got many friends, or you haven't got a father figure or any role models, it is very easy to be sucked in by the glitz and the glamour of what's being portrayed. And like, I mean, I'm doing pretty well, and I've done pretty well in my life. But some days I go on Instagram, I'm like, man, I got to go back to work. There's too much going on over here. But you have to take it back and remember that it's the 1% of the 1%, right? There's a reason that it's being shown, and there's a reason that it's gone viral, and there's a reason that it's got garnished the attention that it's got. And the irony is because it's not normal. That's essentially what viral content is. It's something that has made people stop the scroll and actually engage in it. And that sort of leads me on to my next question, which is, to be honest with you, where I see most of my concern when it comes to sort of behaviors, and the sort of next wave of all this, which is streaming, and this idea of sort of clip farming and trying to create clips and trying to create content whilst out in IRL or in real life for the people over 30 listening to this. But yeah, it's so for me, I do have a little bit of a concern of what the influences that have been created from the manosphere, if that makes sense. So this sort of next wave of, I know what went viral, but I have to one up it. So this is what I'm now going to create. I think it's quite early days, but have you seen any of the impacts on sort of mental health, both boys and girls, or just in general on that thought process?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we, as you said, we are very much in this environment which everybody wants to get viral. There is this perfect life which is currently being built in which you can make content so quickly and you can make hundreds of thousands, if not millions, on creating content. And that is a very appealing thing to many young people because that's the dream. You're seeing these, 20-year-old men who are making hundreds of thousands a month and now living in Dubai and living the life, and they're showing all on social media, and in reality that's not real life. That, they could be doing that, but you're not seeing the grind it took them to get there, or you're not seeing the actual, that one picture that you're seeing or that one clip you are seeing is not portraying what that whole day's like. And yeah, we're seeing, with the rise of AI right now, we're seeing so much more content so much more quickly. And yeah, with these kind of like these clips coming everywhere and streaming, and like people are, you got some great streamers, and you've got some that are coming from this manosphere, which are kind of like building these lifestyles and then selling these products and these memberships in which young men are then putting their money into then making these other people rich. And I think that is a very dangerous thing. And I think, it is still early to fully understand the mental health implications of it. But I think, very similar to the manosphere and those kind of conversations, I think the mental health toll is there because those young people that are in it and those young men are in it, they typically will be suppressing their emotions and their mental health while they're in that mindset, because they feel that they should not have those, and they are often told they shouldn't have those. And if you feel sad, you're just weak. And in reality, that's not the case. And I think, you are seeing a lot of young people, especially now. We're seeing that rise of the kind of the manosphere. We're seeing almost a lot of young men now leaving that section, and we're hearing about the mental health implications that they had there. And I think with all this stuff going on now, I think we're going to have very similar sort of responses in maybe 6 months to a year's time. So yeah, I think right now it's quite difficult to say, but I think in 6 months' time that will be over. The next fad will be coming, and we'll learn about the previous fad as such.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely one to watch. I think one of my sort of concerns with it as well is sort of the promotion of OnlyFans girls within this sort of access to porn, the idea around porn, the idea around women, what that sort of looks like for these sort of younger men. I think
Absolutely.
I grew up as the internet became more regularly accessible. I've seen going from one device per classroom to one device per person to multiple devices per person, whereas kids today have just been born with multiple devices, which is quite scary in that sense. But then what you're seeing also is then the barrier of where that is online. So for me, you had to actively go and look for it. I'm not going to deny that I've never looked at porn as a 14-year-old boy, but like you actively had to make an effort to go and look for it. Whereas now there is an element of softcore, I guess, and some may argue slightly breaching some lines in that case right there in those sort of algorithms. Is there much stuff that you've done around, I guess, the mental health implications of that? Because there is a deeper side to porn.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as you said, it is becoming, the lines are becoming more blurred, and I think it is becoming more easy to see that content. Twitter was known as the way to see whatever you wanted, and we are seeing some regulations put into place now. However, they are still easy to go through. They're easy to avoid, and look at the implications we had with Grok at the start of this year, in which it is so easy right now to create AI pictures of literally anything you could ever imagine in your head. And I think we are seeing the mental health implications of that. We are seeing that young men who feel lonely, who feel isolated, who feel depressed, they are turning to AI to fill that gap. and they're turning to image generation to make them feel better, or they are turning to porn to fill that gap, or they're turning to all these different things to fill those gaps. And that is a short term dopamine hit, but that's not a long term solution. And I think this is the issue that we are finding and we're constantly having. And they're issues that have always been there. That we've always had these issues because porn has always been around in some form. However, because it is so easier to access now, and because it is becoming so mainstream, you can turn on the TV after a certain time at night, and you can see stuff, or you can be scrolling through TikTok and you can see more or less certain things, and it is becoming very dangerous. And equally, there is that body image aspect in which young men might be seeing these topless influencers with six packs, massive biceps, and the most gorgeous girls around them, and they feel, well, I don't look like that. So there's usually one of two approaches. Either they do, is it the looks maxing, which is happening right now, where they are trying to get pumped really quickly, taking body performance enhancement drugs to make them look better, or they go in the opposite route and they are completely depressed, completely anxious, not wanting to be seen with their top off, or not wanting to be seen doing stuff because they feel they're not worth it. And again, it's that mainstream aspect of thirst traps and porn and stuff like that is really damaging. Just that sort of, not necessarily ego, but the confidence that a lot of young men have.
Yeah, and I think that looks maxing has been sort of made popular from an influencer that I was sort of alluding to. So he's from that sort of second generation, and the reason that he
Yes.
does it is because he was so insecure. He's like
Yeah.
he's like 6'2" and wanted to go into politics, and he didn't think he would be able to make it unless he was quote unquote handsome. And
Yeah.
now he takes meth. So I
Exactly.
don't think a career in politics is probably going to happen. But that's the sad
Exactly.
reality of it, right? That's actually the sad reality of
Absolutely.
it. Is
Yeah.
it's amusing as a little bit of a side joke, but there
Yeah.
is
Oh,
not
100%.
everyone's going to become famous like he has off the back of it, and there are going to
No.
be people that try it. So yeah,
Yeah.
it is a concerning sort of stage where we're sort of at, and I think it's because we've not had these conversations sooner, and I think we think we're
Yeah.
helping, but there's already the second and the third wave are already sort of brewing. But I guess
Absolutely.
we could talk about problems all day, but maybe we should talk about
Yes.
a couple of solutions. So, if there's anyone sort of listening who may be working with boys or teaching boys or have teenage boys, or potentially there are some sort of teenage boys, what are some of sort of like the first steps to getting your sort of mental health in check?
Yeah, I think there are some incredible influencers out there right now who are changing the conversation around what it's like to be a young man, in their 20s. You've got a great example is a guy called Sid Batty, who is going viral at the minute on TikTok, and he really shows vulnerability and really shows the actual ups and downs of what it is like to be a 20-year-old. Another great example is Ben West, who has again been around for quite a while now. He's a great mental health campaigner, but he is, showing so much around masculinity and truly opening up what it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to cry. It's okay to have these feelings. And I think those are conversations that we need to be having with young men. Is actually, yes, sometimes you can just have a bad day, and the best thing to do is lie on the sofa, eat a tub of Ben and Jerry's, and cry, and that's okay. But equally, it's about just empowering them, and I think that's really important. It's changing those conversations and changing the narrative away from blaming those young people, and actually just having those conversations with them instead of blaming and saying, I don't want to understand. It's have those conversations, understand what it is that they are viewing, and what is it with certain influencers that they are actually engaging with, and what is it that they feel is right. Because we see a lot of the time, a lot of the stuff in the manosphere, the things that the young men were actually engaging with was the biblical aspects and the fact of the rooting in the biblical texts, And then we found the quiet revival that's been happening over the past few months, in which young people are going to church, especially young men. And I think there are these positive repercussions of what is happening. And I think, yeah, rather than victimizing and blaming these young men, we should be having the conversations with them and actually truly understanding what it is that they like about that content or that they're engaging with, and trying to find healthy alternatives to that. Because, you know, that's what you would do in any other situation. You would try and find healthy alternatives rather than just saying, no, I want nothing to do with this, I'm just going to victimize you. You would work with them to actually find something that suits them. So yeah, I think that's where the positives are. Is there's so much that can be done. It's not a lost cause. It's still the very beginning of these conversations, and nobody's too far gone as such. It's the conversations can be had, and yeah, alternatives can be found, and yeah, I think that's really important.
Yeah, I mean, alcohol-free beer exists, right? It's not there for any other reason as to help people that don't want to drink, right? It gives you the same social status,
Exactly.
the same, you're able to still go out, you're still able to do all of these things. So why is
Exactly.
there not a 0-0 version of the manosphere that allows people to explore personal development, explore
Yeah,
feelings, explore being a teenage boy, allowing them to sort of go on that
exactly.
sort of little bit of a journey? It would be,
Yeah,
yeah, it'd be cool to see what sort of comes next with that, and how that looks, sort of moving
absolutely.
forward. Um,
Yes.
as like a whole though, like as like the men's space, the boys space, the mental health space, I guess, like what do you really like right now? What do you want to see more of, or maybe what do you want to see a little bit less of?
Yeah, I think, you know, we're in a really unique position in this space right now, where actually the men's health and men's mental health field is really being listened to, and I think that's something that's really important, and I love seeing. You know, the government put out the men's mental health strategy at the end of last year, which looked really productive in a way to really support these young men. And I love seeing that, and I love seeing the conversations that are becoming more and more positive and are victimizing young people less and young men less, because it's really important to, as I said earlier, bring them to the table and bring these young men to the table. And I think that's so positive to see so much of that happening. And yeah, just that stigma slowly disintegrating, and more young men feeling able to talk up about how they feel, to actually, you know, either talk to their friends, or if they need to go to counseling or therapy, actually know that they can do that, and that it's not going to affect anything. It's not going to affect their social status by needing to go to counseling or therapy. It's quite a respectable thing to do, to put it bluntly. It's actually quite a good thing to do. And I think, yeah, we're seeing more and more of that, which is so uplifting and so positive to see.
Amazing. Well, short version, Connor. Keep doing what you're doing. But if people have liked what they've heard and they want to find out more, where is the best place to find you?
Yes, yeah, you can find out more about Spark at sparkuk.co.uk, or you can find out more about me at conorwarren.co.uk.
Awesome. Thank you, Connor.
Thank you.